And I said, Dear Dave, apparently whether or not I go to the World Championships in Ireland at the end of July with Team USA is not up to me. However, whether or not I am ready to be the world champion by the end of July is entirely up to me.
Thanks for tuning in to the 179th episode of the Athletes Podcast featuring Rhonda Rajsich. If you aren't familiar with the name, she's arguably the most decorated racquetball player in U.S. history. 15-time U.S. national champion, 4-time U.S. Open champion, 6-time Pan American gold medalist, 2-time world champion. She's kind of a big deal. She also faced a crazy injury in 2008 that we dive deep into during this episode. Honestly, it's incredible what she's been able to overcome. I can't wait for you folks to listen to this story. I'd love it for you guys to comment your favorite part of this episode, maybe what inspired you the most, anything. We're really just hoping to just have more engagement on all platforms, actually, honestly, if I'm being completely transparent. And I'd love for you to just, again, share that moment that has impacted you, whether it's this episode or something in the past. As you know, we have our athletes agreement. Hit that subscribe button. It's what we need to continue to do this on a weekly basis, so we appreciate it. Our sponsor this week, Rooted, you guys know it's the best product out there. I take it every single morning. Provides hydration, essential vitamins and minerals, as well as probiotics. It's the best, everything in one. Use the code AP20 to get 20% off your very own. Try it. Let me know what you think down below as well. They make the best product. Adams is an incredible founder. I encourage you to check out their story because they donate 1% to land, 1% to ocean, no synthetics, mix is easy, carefully sourced, third-party tested, and there's no sugar added, so your mom will be happy about it. This is the 179th episode of the Athletes Podcast featuring Rhonda Rajsich. Here we go. Like you said, the windshield is bigger than the rearview mirror. That was one of the quotes I heard you say, and I was like, damn, that's
Exactly.
that one hit home for me hard. Rhonda,
awesome. Love that.
Yeah, Rhonda Rajsich, thank you so much for coming on the Athletes Podcast. The most decorated racquetball player in U.S. history, 15-time national champion, U.S. national champion, that is. I'm a Canadian over here above the 49th parallel. 4-time U.S. Open champion, 6-time Pan American gold medalist, 2-time world champion. Thank you so much for coming on the show, Rhonda. I am so honored to be able to share your story. I want to give you a little bit of space to share who you are, but first, a little girl at 10 years old challenging Steve Kerr, shooting a basketball. So we're starting there because that's freaking crazy what you did at 10 years old. So before we get into all your inspiring greatness, what you've been able to accomplish over the past couple decades, talk about what you did at 10 years old.
It's wild that you brought that up. Love that story. Love Steve Kerr. My father is a University of Arizona alum. He also played basketball there as well. So, growing up, we just, we were all about the Wildcats and supported them from time to time, going down watching games live at McHale Center. And Steve Kerr was my favorite player in that era because he had the game style and the shooting and, pretty much all the dimensions to his game that I felt reflected a lot of my own at that tender age. He was the player that I aspired to be like at that time in the college game, and I was super stoked when he got drafted by the Suns out of college, and I'm like, great. And the gym that my father and I would go to every day. By the way, my father did not drag me to the gym. It was the other way around. I dragged him to the gym at 5 o'clock in the morning. And my parents got divorced when I was around 5 or 6, and my father kind of dove headfirst into racquetball. That was like his therapy, but it wasn't my father dragging me to the gym at 5 a.m. It was the other way around. And then we would go in the afternoons too. Anyway, the gym that we had belonged to, I saw Steve Kerr shooting around down there one day. I'm like, Dad, that's Steve Kerr. Dad, Steve Kerr works out here too. I'm like, there he is. And so I grabbed the ball and I went and I was shooting at the other basket, kind of like this, watching, mimicking what I'm seeing. And I'm watching him work on his shot. I'm watching him work on his threes. And he didn't have a rebound or anything. He was just doing his own thing the way I was. And so I went down and I just started making conversation with him. I don't even remember what my icebreaker was, but within about the next 3 sentences, I said, let's have a 3-point contest. And he started laughing. He's like, yeah, you wanna take me on? I said, yes. And he's like, okay. So we would just go shot for shot, and I think he ended up making, it was either he made 9 out of 10 and I made 8 out of 10, or he made eight and I made seven. Whatever it was, I lost to him by one. I was pretty okay with that at the age of 10.
I had to start there because it was just too good to be true. And
Yeah, I'm sure if you ask Steve, he would have no recollection of that whatsoever. I mean, I'm sure he's met, thousands of kids in his career as a player and a coach and a mentor. So, yeah, but beyond that, I mean, he was just, even back then, he was a good human being, and he's just continued to grow and evolve into, even more of a great human being and a great leader and a great example, of not just talent and achievement, but decency. And he's great. He's a great person,
I could not agree
and
with you more.
world is better with him. Yeah,
I want to echo that statement. He was someone who, over the past 3 years, everything that's happened, someone who's stayed consistent with his message as well. I say this
very.
only because you are the most decorated racquetball athlete in U.S. history, but you could also be playing in the WNBA right now. And
Man, I still want
I
to.
know, and this is what leads me to
Not
my
gonna lie.
next question. Ask is like, hey, despite all of this, like, we got to be showcasing what you can do because I think you could probably be playing in the WNBA next year if you wanted to. You were doing the coaching thing during COVID. I don't want this to take
Yeah.
away from like your racquetball and all this because we're gonna dive into everything that's happened over the past 12 years. But like, are you training for that right now? What's going on? Like, how do you balance all this? What's
I'm
Rhonda?
always ready.
Yeah, what's Rhonda Racich doing
I'm always
today?
ready for that.
It's always going for it.
Oh yeah, always, always.
Okay, so let's bring people back to at the age of 2, jumping out of the crib to start playing racquetball for the first time, and then we'll take the story from there because it's crazy from start to finish. And like, if I don't ask enough questions, please like make sure you get to the nitty gritty because the details are crazy
Sure.
and you've got an incredible story.
It is pretty wild. So I at 2 years old, my parents joined the health club when it opened in our area, and they stuck me in the nursery as they should. But my father had just started learning how to play racquetball from my godfather, who actually delivered me when I was born as well. He was the director of some division of medicine at the hospital I was born in, so he made sure everything went well. And then my mother was playing tennis with my godmother and doing aerobics, and my parents, both of them, had always been very, very active, very athletic. Uh, so I didn't want to be stuck in the nursery. I wanted to break out of Alcatraz and go do what the adults were doing because that was a lot more fun than playing with fluffy bunnies and building blocks and Legos. So I I figured out how to sneak out. I took one of those wooden building blocks and I would wedge it in between the door and the wall there. When another parent brought their child in to be admitted, and while they were busy with that and checking in that child, I would sneak out when no one was looking, and I would just kind of wander around until I found which court my father was on, and I would kind of take note, like, oh, okay, Dad's on court too, and then I would go down and grab a basketball, which the racquetball courts lined both long sides of the basketball court, so I could see my father as soon as I found him. Go down and grab a basketball and run around with that until my dad was in between games, and then I would run up and steal his racket and run onto the court. And you know, he didn't mind necessarily, but I also don't think he knew I was sneaking out. I think until I started doing interviews like this, where people ask how did you get started, and I had to tell that story, did either of my parents realize that? I think my dad always thought my mom had taken me out. My mom always thought my dad had taken me out. They didn't realize I was completely sneaking out on my own the whole time. But I would run up, steal his racket, hit around a little bit, and he'd be like, "Okay, kid, give the big people the racket back now. What are you doing here? Where's your mother?" And then he would just send me away, and I would go back down to the basketball court, and that's kind of how I would get started at 2. And then, like I said, my folks split up, and racquetball kind of became my father's next new mission of not just his own brand of therapy and getting over things and dealing with things, but okay, well, I'm going to dedicate myself to being really good at this. This is fun. I can do this. I'm going to go start playing tournaments. I'm going to take camps and clinics and learn and get better. And of course, every time he did that, he came home and passed all that knowledge down to me. But for some reason, he wouldn't let me play tournaments until I was 10. And I remember when I started playing tournaments and getting my ass kicked because, I'm playing other kids my age, but they've been doing it, for 2 or 3 years already. And I'm just getting started on the tournament scene. I remember feeling annoyed. I'm like, see, I'm late. I'm already behind. I'm only 10 and I'm already behind. So I dove in even harder. I think I played my first junior nationals at age 11. I think it was in Dallas. I lost. I got absolutely demolished by um, this little phenom named Vanessa Taleo from Tennessee. And immediately after getting my ass handed to me, we became like the best of friends, and we ended up being doubles partners, and we ended up being on the junior U.S. team together, and we won several titles together at junior nationals, and um, yeah, I mean, it was just a really great experience. And by the time I went back to junior nationals at 12, I was, I was, I, God, there were so many of them. I was definitely at least in the top five from then on. Like I never finished below five after that. And I made the junior U.S. team every year that I was eligible. Um, and then I accidentally qualified for the adult team a lot earlier in my life than I had intended to. And the rest is history.
Fastest way to learn is by finding people who are better than you.
Exactly. Exactly. And I have always said that. I think that that's one of the biggest roadblocks to development is the ego gets in the way of oh, well, if I'm going to play, I want to go win. Well, of course you do, but if you have room to get better, you're not going to get better by playing people who aren't challenging you and pressing you to go past where you already are. It's critical to take those lumps so that you can learn from them and get better faster and take those lessons and
You
climb that ladder as it will.
you find someone between the age of 8 to 19, 20 years old that's willing to lose every single day. They're probably going to be a pretty incredible person and pretty phenomenal individual in their teens and afterwards.
I would be remiss if I did not include this story along that exact premise. There was a guy who was a one-time national champion, and he actually coached the U.S. junior team that I was on. I think 2 years, two of the years that was on it. His name was Chris Cole. He just recently passed a couple of years ago, actually. Uh, he he decided. I mean, he played the men's pro tour and he played the national championships and whatnot. But he was never he was one of those players that everyone kind of looked past. He was he was treated like a feeder fish in a way. And still a great player, still, great human and great knowledge of the game and whatnot, but he just didn't have some of the talent and some of the assets that a lot of the other top pros did. But he decided, he's like, I'm going to win nationals next year. And he laid out a plan. And it was not a secret that he had sort of announced this, and it kind of drew chuckles from the rest of the guys that, were kind of a shoe in for the semis and finals. And they're like, yeah, right. Okay, whatever. And then he goes to the next pro stop a couple weeks later and loses like in the first round. And they're all laughing at him, like, yeah, you're gonna win nationals next year. Good luck to you. And he's like, it's okay. I'm right on track. A few months later, every tournament he plays, he's got his roadmap of his development and his schedule and his timetable for where he wants to be in his game. And over the course of that year, every time he lost, the more shit he got for, you know, kind of saying he's going to win nationals when he can't even get to a certain spot in a pro stop or something. So, but through all of it, he never wavered from his plan because he had it all mapped out. And to everyone who was doubting him, he's like, it's not about this tournament, it's about that one. And as of today, I'm right on track. And son of a bitch, he won the national title 11-9 or 11-10 in the tiebreaker against John Ellis that next year. He did what he set out to do because he had clarity. He had clarity, he had purpose, he had focus, and he had the roadmap that he knew was going to work for him to be where he wanted to be at that time. And everybody kept comparing where he was at, each rung of the ladder along the way, saying, "Yeah, you're never going to get to the top." And but he knew better because he knew he was able to have clarity and faith in the system that he had in place to get there. And he delivered because he every step of the way he was right where he wanted to be. He was on time. Everybody else was giving him shit for not being early. basically.
Well, and it
And that's the perfect articulation of what you just said. Like you said, especially kids 8 to 18 or 19 years old, having being able to have the discipline to accept that that chunk of the journey where it's not it's not confetti and popping corks and the big celebrations. It's learning from where you're at now and being clear about where you want to be at the next step and then the next step after that. Another uh another cohort of mine, she just retired a few years ago and became a neuroscientist.
okay.
Fascinating transition. Yeah. She was a kind of had her own racquetball coaching teaching program in her area. And her slogan was, the difference between being good and being great is not one or two big things. It's 1,000 little ones. And that's it. I mean, when you've done this as long as I have and you've been able to see it for that long, it's so true. It's not some massive mega leap, It's not some innate, oh my God, you're so lucky you were born with that talent. It's nothing like that isn't achievable by others. It's doing the little things, and it's doing the little things consistently. It's looking for the little ones, not dismissing the big ones, but I mean, the big ones are so few and far. It really is 1,000 little ones.
It's so well put, and I've heard you talk about how sport is a mirror for life, and it's people don't realize the power of compound and the power of doing
Right.
something, the little things like you said, day in and day out, especially when you don't want to do it. Drinking your
Mm-hmm.
water, making sure you're taking your supplements, stretching, whatever the case may be. Insert any variable. It's like you said, there's 1,000 different things that you could be doing, whether it's wearing your blue
Yeah.
light blocking glasses, whether it's doing some reading, whether it's spending more time with your family. Like, there are endless possibilities. And one of the things that, we talked about, I don't know whether we're even recording there, is like that windshield is so much bigger than the rear view mirror. Like, I love that. I heard you say it. I'm going to say it again. It's like, you looking forward, there's so much ahead. It's like, I'm not even worried
Yeah.
about what I've done in the past.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
And do you, so I know I'm putting the carriage before the horse here, but how do you stay motivated as an individual who's won these titles, who's accomplished so much, who's already the racquetball most prestigious in the US? And like is it now okay, that competitive drive is like, I'm going to go to the WNBA and crush this too? Like, is that there still? Is it, or where are you at?
That has never left. That has never left since I was 2 years old. It's still there.
What lit it?
But yeah, no, the competitive drive is a huge part of it. It's a huge part of it, but it can't just be limited to that, because that can then, if you're not developing and getting better, you're still, hopefully able to enjoy it, but at that point you're kind of just spending energy. Um, for me, it comes from two things. One is that I feel like I'm still doing it for the right reason, and that's because it's fun. If it's not fun anymore, don't do it. Move on to something else that brings you joy, because it is a game, it's a sport, it's supposed to be fun. And if it's not fun, maybe you're doing it for the wrong reasons. If it becomes work, if it becomes laborious, if it becomes um, something that you start to dread, any part of the process that is involved in doing it, um, maybe it's not a good fit. So I feel like the little kid. Like, I don't have to play racquetball. I get to play racquetball. You know, I don't have to play basketball. I get to play basketball. Like, these things bring me unlimited joy, honestly. And so that's a big part of it. That's a big part of not feeling burnt out. Um, the other part of it is, recognizing that I still have room, not just room, but the ability to get better. I mean, for as long as I've been playing, I can look at things in my game right now that are more consistent and more automatic and feel better. And I mean, I'm just articulating these skills better than I ever have before, even from, the same time last year. I thought my serves were great last year compared to what they were before that, and they're even 10 times better now. Like, I have so much more confidence in my serves. I have so much more confidence in my forehand. I have so much. I mean, my backhand has kind of always been my weapon of choice. As far like, what's your favorite shot to hit? That backhand what? Backhand splat, backhand, whatever. So, whatever. Just something with my backhand, and even my backhand feels even more, even more powerful and more pinpoint and more specific. Um, I think my footwork could use a little more work right now, but I feel smarter. So I feel like my footwork could be better because I know that I can make it more efficient and effective than it is right now. So I think it's a combination of, yes, the competitive drive, the ability to enjoy what I do and the process of doing it, and the fact that I'm showing myself that I'm still getting better.
Yeah, and that just being able to show yourself that you're getting better is at the end of the day what matters most.
Yeah.
You attribute a ton of your footwork to basketball.
Yeah.
Applications for athletes across the board. One of the things that I like to highlight here is the fact that a ton of the athletes that we feature on the show have this thing in common, is that, they played a ton of sports when they were younger, and that this whole
Yep.
specialization thing might not be the ideal state for people to be going or striving for peak performance. So
Could not agree with you more.
I'd love for you, as the most decorated racquetball athlete in the U.S., to be able to share what sports you played as a kid growing up, how you continue to play basketball, train, coach. Like, all of these things, like you said, are part of those 1,000 things that add up to being an incredible athlete.
Right. So I played everything I could get my hands on as a kid. I know my father told me that I needed to pick one or two to be great. Instead of being good at everything, pick one or two to be great. So I did that around um, like eighth or ninth grade. But I mean, I played. That didn't stop me from playing soccer on recess. Like, it didn't stop me from playing football every time we were allowed to play football before somebody would get smashed and they would say you can't play football anymore on recess. But um, yeah, I mean, I've got two uncles with World Series rings, so there was a lot of baseball in my childhood. And I mean, honestly, I've carried my love of all sports and my exposure to as many sports as possible um, into my training for racquetball. I mean, I'll give you this much. Obviously, elements of basketball in a few different ways with racquetball, mostly the footwork and the ability to read and react. Um, UFC, mixed martial arts type training is huge. I've taken elements from football. I've taken elements from baseball. I've even taken elements from hockey. I've never been on the ice in my life, but there's things that I see in the way they skate and react. They're reacting to that external stimulus of where the puck is and what to do with it and how to do that with it almost as fast as we have to in racquetball. I mean, the ball moves 160 to 180 miles an hour on a racquetball court. And, I mean, it's a 20 by 40 by 20 enclosed space. It's not like you have room to get out of the way. You have to know what you're going to do with it. You have to get there quick or it's done. So, I mean, I've taken elements from all of those sports. Um, I mean, heck, even frisbee. We use a frisbee motion as a way to teach brand new people. Have you ever thrown a frisbee? Cool. Pretend you're holding a frisbee and swing your racket like this, and that's like that first aha moment of
Oh.
oh. And then as that gets more comfortable, then all right, now you know what that feels like. Now pretending that you're batting. Racquetball swings are the exact same almost as a baseball swing, except that you're doing it one-handed instead of two.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just being able to take elements that are critical in other sports, not just as an analogy for them to be like, oh yeah, I know what that looks like, I know what that feels like, and then incorporating it into something that maybe isn't so familiar, like hitting a racquetball,
Mm-hmm.
for the first time.
Yeah, no.
So like I said, I've taken a lot of different elements from a lot of different modalities to incorporate into my own training, and I think that perspective kind of sets it apart from, like you said, that specialized training.
Yeah. And this, and I'm all for specialization at a certain point. Don't get me wrong, but I think incorporating a variety of training aspects. We just had Brad Thorpe, who's esteemed as like Mr. Isometrics on the 175th episode, and like,
I saw
totally
that.
educated me on the power of isometrics. And hey, I'm not sitting here and doing them every single day like I should be, maybe, but there's value in isometrics, and there's also value in resistance training, and there's value in going for a run and swimming and
Hmm.
going for a bike. We recently did a
Yeah.
triathlon or a sprint triathlon, and I got my ass handed to me swimming. That's something I should probably do more of because I suck at it. What are things that you continue to search for that you maybe aren't as good at that you try and get better right now? I know you just talked about it, your serves you improved on, but outside of maybe sport in general, I'd love for you to share maybe even like personal side, because I know you've talked about you sit at like a 10 out of 10 on your pain scale on a daily basis from your injury. I don't know if that's still the case. That was a couple years ago, but we haven't
Oh
even
yeah.
talked about
It's
your
actually worse
injury.
now. It's about at 18 out of 10 right now.
Okay, so why don't we let you share your story there, and then people will maybe be able to grasp what you've been able to accomplish since then, and just the crazy journey you've been on.
All right. I'll give you the abbreviated version.
We want the nuts and bolts, though.
You want the nuts and bolts? Okay,
Oh
here it
yeah.
comes. All right, you're gonna get the unedited R-rated language version too then.
Okay.
Um, so in 2008, I was living in Hermosa Beach, California. Um, I was walking along the Strand, which, for those who don't know, the Strand is that slab of concrete kind of between the houses and the sand, right there on the coastline. And you've probably seen it in movies or TV shows: people biking, walking their dogs, rollerblading, running, headphones on, whatever. Um, so I was living there, and I was out on a Saturday night walking along the Strand. I was trying to head to a convenience store to see if they were open because we were out of water, and we did not have what we needed to feel comfortable drinking LA Tap. So um, it was late at night. Walking along the Strand, I saw a guy kind of just milling around, standing there, not really doing anything, and he looked towards me and made contact. He's like, "Hey, how's it going?" "I'm good, man. How are you?" He's like, "All right, what's up?" I'm like, "Not much." Just kind of an odd, where's this conversation? I thought it was just, a cordial Californian being cordial. And the next thing I know, this other guy comes off of a darkened patio and gets in my face, and he's like, What the fuck you say to my boy?" And I was like, kind of taken aback, like, "Where'd you come from? And what exactly is your problem?" But I didn't say any of that. I was just like, "Nothing, man. I'm just on my way. You guys have a good night." And I walked in between them, trying to avoid any kind of escalation, trying to just, "I'm just on my way. I'm not your problem. Just whatever you're doing, I don't need to be a part of it." And I took about 6 or 7 steps, and the next thing I know, bam! And it wasn't a pain sensation as much as it was the sound that I remember. It sounded like when you snap celery in half, and it just felt like everything that was on this side of my face is now over here. And before I could really process what was going on, bam, the other side. And then I realized I was getting punched from behind and repeatedly, and I just kind of went like this and tried to cover up. And I took maybe 10 to 15 shots to my face and head, and kind of eventually squirreled away, and I turned around and I squared up. And this all took place over a distance of maybe 8 to 10 feet. And I turned around and I squared up, and instinctively I wanted to hit back. But my immediate thought was that I have Worlds in 6 weeks, and I don't want to break my hand on your dumb, stupid face and not be able to hold my racket and go play for Team USA. So I'm just kind of standing there, micro evaluating the situation, and there was some words exchanged between them. I didn't say anything. I'm just sort of watching and waiting to see what happens next, um, because I didn't want to escalate if I didn't have to. At some point, I think they got a little startled because I was never unconscious and I was never off my feet. And I think they were afraid somebody was going to see, or something, somebody was going to catch that, like whatever. I don't know. All of a sudden, I know that they ran away. In the meantime, this eye is kind of going like this. camera one, camera two, camera one, camera two, and this was fading. So I turn around and I start walking home like this. And actually, I don't know if do you remember that very first Pirates of the Caribbean movie with Johnny Depp
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
Orlando Bloom? Okay, there was that one pirate in that first one who had the wooden eye that kept falling out the whole movie. He's chasing it around the ship deck and whatnot. Well, for some reason, I kept thinking of that scene, and I'm like, oh my God, if my eyeball falls out, it's gonna get sand all over it. It's gonna be gross. They're not gonna be able to put it back in. So I'm walking home like this, trying to keep my eye from falling out of my head. And I actually felt like I was being a little over ridiculous in that time. I found out actually 2 years later from an eye specialist that it could have fallen out. So he applauded me for making sure that it didn't. But um, as I'm walking home like this, I hear something. I turn around, and it was the guy who had come off the patio, um, coming back at me, running towards me with his fist up and still wearing the brass knuckles, and running towards me like he was going to Superman punch me. And I turned around and I saw him, and I stood there like this. I put my left hand out and I said, "Dude, just stop, just stop." And he said, "I'll kill you right here. You think I give a shit? I just got out of prison. I don't care. I don't give a shit. I'll kill you where you stand." And at that point, I I dropped both hands. I made fists, and I said, "Okay, then go ahead. Go ahead. I'm right here. Kill me." And that's all I said. But I mean, I think I had that reaction because in my mind, I'm thinking, you chicken shit. You guys came at me 2-on-1 from behind in a surprise attack the first time. Now we're face to face. You don't get to surprise me again. You may be, I don't care that you're a guy. I don't care that you're bigger than me. I don't care that you have a weapon. I hit for a living and I know how to generate force. So you very well may kill me tonight, but I will hurt you on the way down. So let's go. And at that point, I was ready to defend myself if he came at me again. And he didn't. He just kind of looked me up and down and went and turned around and ran off again. At which point I continued to take the long way home because I didn't want them to realize, where I lived from where I got attacked. It was just a few steps away, really, from the property that I lived on. So I took the long way around, walked around the in between the Hermosa Redondo border, and came back up a few houses and went through the Hermosa Avenue side to get to my front door. And it never even occurred to me to call the cops. It never even occurred to me that I was going to have to go to the hospital. I just remember thinking, man, this is going to be really sore in the morning. I hope I still have some, hope I have some good enough medication at home, some Advil, something. I walked upstairs, and my girlfriend at the time was there with her friend. They had been hanging out for her friend's birthday. And I'm just kind of, digging through a pharmacy bag from. I actually had a concussion earlier in the week, and I had something from the pharmacy that I never opened. I never took it, and I was thinking, oh man, I'm glad I still have this bag. Let's see if this will work. She came around the corner and she saw me, and she's like, "Oh my God, what happened to you?" I said, "I got hit." She's like, "Who hit you?" I said, "I don't know. Two guys downstairs." "Why?" I'm like, "I don't know. Go ask them." I really don't know. And in the meantime, I guess her friend was calling 911, and they were there like that. I mean, they were there very, very quickly. I was confused how they were able to get there that fast. They ended up taking me to a hospital in Torrance. Um, my girlfriend at the time had followed in her car, and we waited until I got the scans back, and the doctor had come in and said that I've had several facial fractures and I was going to require a reconstructive surgery, and the doctors would be in to talk about that with me more as soon as they were available. In the meantime, an eye doctor was going to come in and check on my eye, and I'm like, wait, excuse me, what? Because she just kind of like walked through, didn't even stop while she said all that, and just walked out another door. I'm like, you're not saying, hey, don't forget the milk. Like, you just told me my face is broken. What? So, yeah, and we had a few more tests, and the eye doctor came in, and at some point, my girlfriend had gone out down the hallway to call my mother, and hearing my mother's shriek at the other end of the phone is something I can't unhear, and that actually was more disturbing to me than the news that my face was shattered. And she came back in and handed me the phone, and my poor mother is just wailing on the other end. And I'm like, "Mom, I'm fine. It's okay. I'm okay. She's like, no, you're not. You're in a hospital. I'm like, Mom, they didn't rape me. They didn't rob me. They didn't kill me. At the end of the day, I just took some shots to the face, and I'm gonna be fine. It's okay. It'll heal. This is no big deal. It's fine. Um, so my mother caught a flight immediately, came out as quickly as possible. Before she had a chance to, she was trying to get her flight organized, and while she was doing that, my father found out about it. But I don't know if you remember that game called Operator when we were kids, where you sit in a circle and you say, a secret from ear to ear, and by the time it gets back to the person who said it, it's morphed into something completely different. Well, unfortunately, that's what happened when by the time my father heard about it, um, he was told that I was beaten to death by baseball bats and I was dead. So that was obviously extremely um, tragic for him, and all of the emotions that I'm sure he was flooded with in trying to get facts straight, and even still being jumped and being in the hospital, and um, I don't know that he ever fully recovered from that, honestly. Um, but anyway, so I had both parents there. I got jumped on June 1st. I had facial reconstructive surgery. They put 5 titanium plates in my face. My surgery was supposed to last between 4 and 5 hours, and it ended up taking over 12 because there was so many bone fragments that they had to um, take out before they could start the reconstruction. I guess they didn't realize how extensive the damage was until they got in there and saw it, more than the scans reflected. Um, so yeah, I got jumped on June 1st. I had reconstructive surgery on the 11th. Not sure how long I was in the hospital total after that, just because I was on so much medication. Um, I lost 37 pounds. I couldn't eat solid food until about October. I could not sleep laying down. Even when I got out of the hospital, I had to go back to the doctor's office 2 or 3 times a week for one of them to recalibrate my equilibrium for about 3 weeks. Um, it was pretty miserable. I can honestly say I've had more than my share of mashed potatoes than anyone should have to have during any time period of their life. But that's really all I could eat was, shakes and mashed potatoes and soup, um, really soft foods only. And they gave me a walker to move around my home to go from the bed to the couch, basically. I had to have a walker because I was so heavily medicated. I couldn't really take myself anywhere with any distance or stability. Um, but by the end of June, um, I ended up coming back to Arizona and I trained with my trainer for 10 days. And what that looked like was my first workout was 10 sets of one step ups. And that's all I could do. He's like, okay, you're done. You got to go home. I'm like, and I was pretty upset because I'm still trying to go to Worlds. And obviously the news hit the racquetball community like wildfire. And I got, you know, calls and cards and flowers and emails and social media posts and the outpouring of support was I was not emotionally prepared for how that instance was going to impact other people. I was not emotionally prepared to have such a flooding of support from across the world and people that I had never even met before in countries that don't even have racquetball courts. I was very very humbled by that experience. Um, Huge indicator for that was I literally got my face shattered. I didn't cry. I had facial reconstructive surgery. I didn't cry. Um, I was fully prepared for, the comeback to be able to go to Worlds at the end of July and you know, all the things that was going to entail to be ready and didn't cry. Came home from the hospital, saw the first bouquet of flowers sitting at the front door with a card on it, and I started bawling. And I mean there was multiple tournaments held in my honor where that were for fundraising, and people made batches of T-shirts that they sold and sent me the checks. People had bake sales, and I couldn't believe how the community came together to support me in all the ways that they did, and it's still it's still tugging at my heartstrings that people showed how much they care when I had no idea. Um, along that time, after the surgery, before I had come back to Phoenix and started training, our U.S. team coach and I had a phone call, and he's like, "Okay, so how you doing? What'd the doctor say? What's the prognosis? Do you need anything?" And during that conversation, we wrapped it up, and he's like, "Well, we're all going to be playing our asses off for you, kid. Heal up and good luck, and we'll be in touch." And I was like, Yeah, I'm going to be playing my ass off with you guys." And he laughed. He's like, "You're not going." I'm like, "What? Excuse me? Worlds is the reason I didn't hit back. Don't you dare take this away from me." Like, it never, ever, ever was even remotely possible to me that I would not be going to Worlds. And I apparently the delegation wasn't entirely set in stone yet, especially barring, the fact that this kind of just happened and I should be going. So now who's going to go if I don't, type of a thing. They were in that decision making process, and I I was more upset and depressed about that for a few days than I was about getting jumped. Like, to me, getting jumped was, albeit painful, it was just, a bump in the road. Like, I'm still going to Worlds. This isn't going to change anything. I'm going to heal up. I'm going to be fine. I'm going to go, get back to taking on the world and do what I do. So this interruption of not being able to go to Worlds now was like, it was not even remotely a thought that I ever had. So I got really upset. I got really depressed. Worlds was the reason I was getting up every day doing whatever I could that day to get ready for Worlds. So I sent an email to the head coach, and I copied the board and the U.S. team committee and anybody in a position of leadership that I had an email address for. And I said, "Dear Dave, apparently whether or not I go to the World Championships in Ireland at the end of July with Team USA is not up to me. However, whether or not I am ready to be the world champion by the end of July is entirely up to me. So you do whatever you need to do and have your meetings and your phone calls and do whatever you feel is truly best for Team USA. But just so you know, I will be ready to be the world champion by July 27th, because that was the day that our flights were leaving. So I will be ready to be the world champion by July 27th. So if you don't win and I didn't go, that's on you." I totally forgot that last sentence. Every time I've told this story in the last several years, I forgot about the part where the last sentence I wrote was, "So if I don't go and you guys lose, that's your fault." I forgot I said that. Like, how dare I? Like, even now, I'm like, God, such an arrogant little ass. But I knew something that they didn't. I knew how I felt. I knew where I was, and I knew where I wanted to be, and I knew how to get there. And I truly did believe in myself when nobody else did. And as soon as I hit send on that email, I had to let go of whether or not I was going to go. I had to let go of any expectation of any particular outcome either way, and just go about my business as if I'm still training to go to Worlds, because that's what I came home from the hospital to do. So, um, early July, I went and played in an outdoor tournament in Huntington Beach, and I played three divisions. I think I actually won one of them, but I remember being really pissed that I didn't win all three. And he came down from Stockton to evaluate me, and he's like, "Wow, I wasn't expecting that." He's like, "You look surprisingly good. I mean, I didn't expect you to be able to play like that so soon." And he's like, "So what about Worlds? And well, what about this? And what about that?" And all of those things and I know that, you know, two parts of his arguments. One of them was, genuine care and concern for my well-being, which I appreciated. And the other one was also, kind of covering their own behind if something were to happen, if I went and got re-injured somehow or had some kind of episode. So I totally understand. I don't blame him for being concerned and cautious and all of that. But at some point during our conversation, every yeah, but what about this? I'd come up with an answer, or we'll figure it out when we get there, or we'll figure it out between now and then. But ultimately, the thing I said that kind of swayed him in my favor was, I said, "Dave, I don't need my face to hit the ball. My arms and my legs still work. I can still hit it, and I can still go get it." And he laughed and he goes, "Well, that's a good point. I didn't really think of it that way." And I was like, "Well, you just watched me do it for the last 3.5 days. Like I've proven that I'm capable, and this is my first rodeo since coming out of the hospital. I've got, 3 more weeks before our flight leaves." And I went and played another tournament too. And I lost 11-10 in the fifth game tiebreaker to a US teammate of mine who's an absolute legend. She's the most decorated doubles player ever, male or female. She's incredible. And she got me by 1 point. And I asked her, because she's, somebody that I was going to be going on that trip with. I said, and she does not mince words. I can trust her opinion implicitly. I said, "Amy, tell me the truth. Do you feel like if I go on this trip that I will be the weak link of Team USA?" And she's like, "Oh my God, shut up. I just barely beat you and I know that I got a lucky crack to do it." Like, no, you're not a weak link. No, you're fine. Okay, I'll take it. Um, and so I was able to maintain my spot, and I did go to Ireland with Team USA. And 64 days after getting jumped, 53 days after facial reconstructive surgery, and 29 days after voluntarily abandoning all pain medication against medical advice, I won my first world title without even going tiebreaker.
And like you say, nothing happens to you, it happens for you.
Correct. Correct. That event, um, it gave me so much more than it took. I mean, really, the daily pain level that I experience, um, that is just never, for the foreseeable future, is never going away. It's my daily, no matter how bad it hurts, it's my daily reminder of everything that I have to be grateful for, and I truly am. I truly am. Um, I've got a book coming out called "Never Off My Feet" for obvious reasons. Now that you know the story, and yes, that attack is in there, kind of in the middle, but it's not actually about that. It's about all the other things that happened in my life that led up to that. A lot of people ask, like, how could you remain so calm? How could you have the presence of mind to think about how getting into that fight could have affected your ability to go to Worlds, or, not be able to hold your racket or whatever? How did you recover from that? How are you not scared to walk down the street alone? Like a lot of how could you have dealt with that the way that you did in real time, and how could you have dealt with that the way that you have since you walked away? Um, and that's primarily what the book is going to be about. It's about a lot of life experiences I had since being born, where I needed a life-saving surgery before the age of 5. Um, it's about a car accident that I probably should not have never lived through or walked away from. It's about, just a lot of other catalyzing, life experiences that, in one way or another, shaped who I was the moment that I got jumped, and then the person that I have been and maintained since before the attack, after the attack, um, with this new, daily experience. And I mean, to be honest, it's never been smooth sailing. I've had several other, subsequent surgeries, most of them within the first 2 or 3 years after the initial reconstructive surgery. But I just had another one in 2021. I just had another one 2 years ago. I've needed another one since last year. I just haven't gotten it yet, because it sucks. I don't like not being able to eat real food for 5 months. But I mean, at some point, the pain level gets so extreme that I'm like, okay, I've got to figure something else out. I've got to try something else. I've got to see if something else moved. I got to see if another plate has broken. I got to see if another screw came out and the plate's moving around. Whatever causes the pains that I'm having, in the sensations that I'm having them. Um, it's obviously going to have to be addressed probably at some point, off and on, for the rest of my life, because there's nothing you can do with shredded nerves. And that's why the pain is so extreme, is because, like I said, there was so many bone fragments that had to be taken out. Like when they fragmented, they, scattered, and, multiple hits to that same area, they're like little razors in there. They just
Yeah.
sliced everything up.
Did you use the power of like visualization? Were you supplementing? Were you red light therapy? Like
100%.
what were you doing during that time?
So I didn't discover red light therapy until about 5, 6 years ago. Um, Actually longer, 7. Um, but I did visualize because that was the only way I could train.
Hmm.
I mean, I would watch video. Like I said, I was heavily medicated. I couldn't go but from the couch to the bed and back and forth, back and forth between. And again, I wasn't even allowed to lay down to sleep.
For
I
eight
had to sleep
weeks.
sitting up, which is not comfortable. You're not getting any quality of sleep, which is when a lot of repair tends to happen. I wasn't particularly supplementing, um, but visualization was 1,000,000% the key to how I performed in Ireland at Worlds. It was so the key to any visualization, and I'm sure you've heard this from all the other athletes you've had on your show. Key to any visualization is making it as real as possible by using all of your senses. So, like, I would take myself through a racquetball practice and I would visualize myself arriving at the gym, taking my bag out of the car, shutting the door, locking the car, recognizing what time of year it was, and knowing that my door handle would be hot while I shut it. Walking into the gym, scanning my membership card, going to the court that I preferred, and noticing whether or not I needed to mop the floor, if it was clean or not. Changing my shoes, tying them, getting my glove on, hearing the Velcro of my glove go across, the back of my hand, grabbing which racket I want. I mean, the sensations, and then walking onto the court, and the rubber smell of the ball, the musty smell of the court, the sound of the wood creaking below my feet, the echoey sound of the ball bouncing on the wood, the snap in my strings when I would straighten them. Like all of these things are you're soaking up every sensory perception that you have from that kind of a memory. And that's essentially what you're doing is you're creating a memory through specific subliminal context. And when you do it well enough, your your mind doesn't know the difference between a memory and a very, very solid visualization. And when your brain can do that, your body's going to follow. So even though I was physically incapable of training, of even walking myself to the bathroom without the walker, that visualization prepared my body for what I needed to do on the court when I was able to finally physically get on the court.
It's crazy. I'm like you said, I've heard this from others. Aaron Volpatti is one who specifically referenced it. Episode 156 on the show. He played in the NHL for the Canucks, Washington Capitals. I don't know if you're familiar with his story. Essentially, he had third-degree burns on 40% of his body, and within 2 months, he was back playing hockey at the junior level. And doctors told him he'd never play sports again. You know, so these things happen. We're fortunate enough to be able to share these stories on the show. Our mission is to educate, entertain, and inspire. You've certainly done the educating and inspiring piece, no doubt. And I think some of those Steve Kerr stories have been entertaining at the beginning. I know you also said you'd be confident taking on Steph Curry in a 3-on-3 point competition as well, mainly because he'd underestimate you. And I thought this was an interesting point to talk about given female sports, where they're at, how females are still underestimated, whether it's the PHF, whether it's the WNBA, whatever the case may be, whether it's the LPRA. Our society is slowly adopting female sports, but again, I emphasize on the slowly part because it's only 5-6% of traditional media is dedicated towards it, and still something that needs to change. You've been around the sport world for years. Can you maybe share what you're seeing, how we can do more, what we can do, Rhonda?
Um, that is such a multifaceted question. First of all, I think the most glaring example of the inequality, besides the coverage, is the pay disparity. I mean, I don't know what the lowest NBA player makes, but the most, I guarantee you, it's 10 times more than the highest paid WNBA players because I believe their max contracts are only worth $238,000. Brittany Griner never, or any WNBA player, should not be having to go overseas to supplement their income when they are amongst the best in the world at what they do. Um, without using names, I will not intentionally publicly throw anyone under the bus, but I had a sponsor, and in my contract, um, I was their number one female player. Their number one male player finished number one in the world that year. His end of the year ranking bonus was $300,000. I did the exact same thing in the same year, and my contract stipulated that my end of the year ranking bonus was $6,000 for doing the same thing on the same court with the same rules, the same court dimensions, the same everything. And that's, I mean, really the only sport that has any kind of pay parity is tennis. And I know that that was a long fight as well. But for the women to dedicate just as much of their lives, if not even more so, because they are also still expected to
Carry a child.
take care of everything, carry a child, be also be a parent, take on so many more responsibilities, to get paid, so like to not be able to sustain the living that they deserve based on the effort, the time, the dedication, and the discipline and the sacrifices that they make to put into what they do at the highest level. I don't I don't care what argument you will try to come up with against that. I cannot see any world in which and those arguments hold any water at all. And you can't tell me that it's not, oh, it's not as fun, it's not as exciting, women aren't as good athletes. Bullshit. If that's how you really feel, let's get together. You pick the sport, I'll play you in it, and tell me that you're going to beat me in every single thing we do.
I actually
Cool.
kind of
Then
thought
maybe
you
I'll at least entertain your argument, but I know that that's not the case. So
I actually have like this concept, and I'm going to share it here for the first time publicly. But like, I had this idea of bringing together some of the best athletes that we've featured on the show. I think someone like yourself, who's a multi-sport athlete. The other person that comes to mind off the top of my head is like a Mitchell Hooper, who just won World's Strongest Man. He also shot like 76 last time he played golf, plays basketball, like can do a variety of sports. And my thought is maybe in 5 or 10 years, once we have a couple few hundred episodes on the Athletes podcast, we can tap a couple of you on the shoulder and say, hey, let's make our own Olympics and show people what both genders and what everyone's capable of doing. And honestly, being able to bring together the best in the world and showing not only just who the best is, just like the fact that a variety of sports can be played together, people can enjoy and like experience the
yeah,
power of sport too. Because I
yeah,
think that's what's lost is like pickleballs exploded recently. And I know on a recent podcast or one that I listened to of you, you hadn't played it yet. I don't know whether you've played it now. It's a sport I like, but I don't see all the
I
beef
tried it
between
once.
pickleball, ping pong, racquetball. Like everyone wants to be the best athlete at their sport, and I get that. But like the power of sport's incredible, right? And like if we can come together and
Yeah,
showcase that maybe playing a ton of these sports can be mutually beneficial.
I agree. I agree 100%. I think that all sports are vital to not just health and wellness, but also, I mean, the enjoyment of why they exist in the first place.
hmm
I know that my I have a slight beef with pickleball and that it's stealing all the racquetball players
Yeah,
out
I
of our
figured.
sport because the feedback, that a lot of people give is that, it's still an activity that they can enjoy and that it's easier on their body physically after a certain point. Um, they might be icing a few different joints after a long racquetball tournament, but with pickleball they can play 3 days a week and they don't have to ice at all. So,
hmm
but I'm like, I get it. I'm not saying it's not fun. I'm not saying that you shouldn't do it. But don't leave racquetball for pickleball. Just come back. It's still fun over here too.
I bet you they'd be a way better racquetball player after having played pickleball.
You think?
I think that there's probably crossover. I think you're a better racquetball player because you played basketball and because you did those things when you're younger. And I think if you had just played racquetball your whole life, you'd probably be injured. And
Oh
like
yeah.
your joints would be worn out because you're doing the same frisbee movement every time, right? Like I think there's a reason why some of the best athletes in the world that are able to be sustainable for decades is because they do a plethora of training modalities, and they're incorporating
Yes.
every single aspect into their like overall wellness health routine. Like it can't just be, oh, I'm going to be a hockey player and I'm going to train for hockey and I'm going to eat for hockey. Like that's it. Right. And it's like, okay, you're going to
Yeah.
have injuries. And it's like, one of the things that I think I just wanted to pull that from you. And I think you've articulated it really well. It's like you have a very unique training style. And like, I wanted to pull out the secrets, and maybe you'll share a couple of them with our audience now with the nutrition and training. But like, I know you also want to keep those because that's what's allowing you to be successful for so long, and others have to keep trying to
I will
follow along.
I will tell you will tell you this. This was like a hard lesson for me to learn. I thought that overtraining was code for being lazy. Like I don't want to overtrain. I'm like, okay, then you can go sit there. I'm gonna go do 10 more sets. Um, I took that as code for being lazy or whatever, and I don't have that. So I actually had written on my shoes in college, when I was training for basketball. I had the word go on my left foot and harder on my right foot, so that every time I leaned over to puke, I was reading that I needed to go harder. And I also trained myself to the point where I'm feeling like if I didn't make myself throw up during a workout, I wasn't working hard enough. And my coach, uh, he went to the United States Olympic Training Center in Colorado Springs for a coaching seminar over a weekend, and he called me, and all I could hear was kind of like this background noise. And he's like, Rhonda. I'm like, yeah. I'm like, did you butt dial me? He's like, no, I'm in a seminar. I'm like, then why'd you call me? He's like, can you hear this? No, coach. Oh, did you hear that? This is you. I'm like, no, coach, I really can't hear what they're saying. So he comes back from the thing, and basically he was taking all these notes, and he's like, I thought about you the entire weekend, especially when, they were talking about overtraining. He's like, I think you're doing too much. And I was like, no way. I said, if I'm not winning every single match I play, I'm not doing enough. And he's like, no. He's like, you know what their stats said? He's like, they were saying that it's better to be 50% undertrained than 5% overtrained. And I was like, I disagree. Well, anyway, long story short, I did learn the hard way after several years of overtraining, not realizing that that's what I was doing, that I was just grinding myself down, like, down to the bone, to the point where I didn't have what I needed to move forward. I didn't have what I needed to get better. I wasn't strong enough. I wasn't fast enough. I wasn't nutritionally sound enough. I wasn't rested enough because I was never giving my body a break. I was doing too much, and I didn't know that was a thing. I thought, like I said, I thought that was code for not wanting to work hard. And so I came up with my own little triangle, and all three sides of the triangle have to be the exact same length, because if any one of these arms of these three principles, if one is shorter than the other, or too long than the other two, your triangle is going to fall apart. It's not going to be stable. It's not going to suit your needs. And that's why I use this shape instead of saying, it has to be 3 days a week of this and 5 days a week of that. Like, no, I'm not going to tell you what your protocol should be, because every athlete is different. Every human is different. So you have to figure out what formula works for you, but each line of that triangle needs to be equivalent to the other two. And the three lines of the triangle are physical training, nutrition, and rest and recovery. If your rest and recovery, or your nutrition, or your training is off from any of the other one or two, it's not a perfect triangle, and you're not going to get those needs met. And mental is in there too, but I think I include that in like the physical training part, like the mental and the physical training. If you want to add that fourth line, make it a square. But um,
Uh, if you were to give us one action item or one thing to do for each of those, is there one that stands out? Like, for me, if I'm thinking like rest and recovery, it's like throwing on my blue light blocking glasses an hour before, maybe like taking that creatine in the morning for performance. Like, what is it? Like, are there maybe those
sleep,
one or two? Thank you. That's
sleep.
that's the best supplement
There,
in
I
the
mean,
world, and it's
if
free.
if 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 you're eating right and training hard and not getting enough sleep, your body can't be ready for what you're going to demand of it. And sleep is something that was always really hard for me, just because I traveled so much. I was in a different time zone almost every week, and it was hard for me to get any kind of circadian rhythm. Um, but knowing knowing yourself, knowing your body, knowing your needs, you can figure that out. I finally got around to it, and I'm annoyed with myself that it took me so long. But for example, I just had a tournament in Chicago. Chicago has a 2 hour time difference. Something that I would do if I was worried about, the 2 hour time difference for competitions and what times my match might be scheduled is 2 weeks before that tournament, I would start playing like, okay, if I play at 10 a.m., that's gonna be 8 a.m. here, so I should start training at 8 a.m. here. Oh, if I'm gonna play at 4 p.m. there, that's gonna be 2 p.m. here. I should play my second match that day at 2 p.m. here. Also, getting to bed 2 hours earlier here, waking up 2 hours earlier here. You start kind of resetting your clock before you get there. That was hard for me in the past because pre-COVID, I was on the road 40 to 45 weeks a year, either competing or, I mean, between the US team, the pro tour, the outdoor stuff, plus camps, clinics, appearances, exhibitions, I was gone quite a bit, and I didn't have that time. I didn't have that week or two before a tournament to recalibrate my clock. I didn't have that week or two after a tournament to recalibrate my clock. I was going from one city, come home for 2 or 3 days, go to the next, and that was going to other countries as well. So I would say sleep is I think the biggest underutilized recovery tool that we just sort of take for granted. Oh, I'll sleep when I get tired. I'll wake up when my alarm goes off. I think the greatest indication of getting enough sleep is not having to set an alarm and still being up in time to start your day before you're late for anything.
Yeah. Could not agree with you more there.
Training I kind of do just because it just it kind of keeps falling into my lap. Like the like training people in the gym, and not just on the racquetball court, but I mean like multi-sport, or just even general fitness and wellness training I've been doing. That all kind of came about just during COVID when we had no tournaments. Um, Finding ways to stay active in my own living room and doing the stairs in my apartment complex. Um, and other people kind of facing the same, hey, my kids don't have soccer anymore. What can we do to keep them off the couch and off the video games? Um, but I've definitely been very intentional in the last several months about getting my speaking career. I mean, I've been speaking for even since before I got jumped. And coaching, I kind of, I guess I've been doing it for several years as well. I didn't know that that's what I was actually doing, and that was actually a thing to get paid for as well. So I am focusing on those two things pretty heavily right now. So
And where can
that's really.
people find that, like, so that they can source out this information and make sure that if they are looking for this and they want more than the free hour and 10 minutes we just provided them, where can they find more of Rhonda Rajsich?
Um, so I will send you my socials, and I actually have a website that's in the middle of being constructed right now. We're kind of on the finishing touches, hoping to have it done in the next couple of weeks. The website will be rhondaspeaks.com, and I can let you know when that finally gets finished and activated and all that. In the meantime, those one pagers that I sent you, um,
Perfect.
I have those in a, obviously a sendable form.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. And well, I'll make sure to share those out. And I think the other thing that we should let you share, give you space for, is like we talked about that rear view windshield. What is on that windshield? And I actually want to pivot it to this like specific question around like twilight years. And I heard you talk about like you won't look in the rear view mirror until the twilight years. Like, are there predetermined ages for those twilight years or?
no, no,
Okay.
there's no predetermined age. That's a feeling. That's a
Okay.
that's a that's a when you're on a long drive, you've got to stop to get gas, you've got to stop to hit the restroom. Other times you just kind of stop and look around because it's a beautiful view. I think that's the analogy for that one that's going to depend on what the view is when the car slows down enough to take a look.
Okay. I had to ask.
Yeah, no, I so that you know Twilight Years thing, and as far like just the main focus being on the windshield and not the rear view. When I did finish number one in the world twice, it didn't hit me until the end of that second year. I was at the Olympic Training Center, finished coaching a camp that I had coached for many years with my coach, in Colorado Springs. And I don't know if you've ever been there, but there's like this dome that has the Olympic rings cut out of one side of it. You can like look out of the rings, but also on the inside of this cube, there's all these quotes painted on the walls by different Olympians and what years they competed and what their quote was. And one of them said something about, standing on the podium, realizing that I'm literally the best in the world is a feeling that I don't have words for, or something like that. And I remember thinking, I can't wait to have that feeling when I'm the best in the world. And then it just kind of went, wait, I literally just finished number one in the world for 2 years in a row. I am the best in the world. And I kind of started like bawling and in the cube after, like, when I had that realization, because like I literally achieved this goal that I set for myself how many years ago? And I was still so focused on what's next that I missed it. I felt like I missed it. I didn't even recognize that I hit that mark. Not just once, but twice. For 2 years, and missed it. Didn't celebrate it, didn't recognize it, didn't absorb it, didn't acknowledge it to myself. Not like I need, my whole friends and family to throw me a party for it or anything. I set out to do this and I did it, and I was so focused on that process of doing it that I didn't recognize I did it. So that's where that kind of came from. So I think the rear view is important to at least kind of, you can't know exactly where you are until you can recognize where you are from where you've been. So that rear view is important, but it's not as important as the windshield going forward.
I feel like I could talk to you for hours. I'm excited for our next
I do
conversation.
too.
Having just spent an hour and 15 minutes with you, like I said, I really appreciate your time. Seriously, from the bottom of my heart, can't thank you enough for sharing your expertise, wisdom with the Athletes Podcast listeners, myself. You are a leader, mentor, role model for women in sports. I do have to ask you, if you had an individual growing up, a dream athlete that you looked up to, knowing that you played at basketball at Phoenix College, named freshman of the year, first team all conference player for 2 years, like, you've got these incredible accolades. Was there that individual that you looked up to that you wanted to try and emulate?
Jordan. Jordan. Easy.
Did you watch Air?
The day it came out.
I had to make
The
sure.
day it came out.
Okay, so Air or Jaws?
Oh, Jaws.
I
I
only
gotta go
have to
Jaws.
ask because I know that's your film. We'll
Man, you
pivot.
you you dug deep into the research on this. I'm super impressed.
Hey, I got you. I didn't know that you had two uncles that were World Series winners, so we'll have to maybe highlight them later on down the road. But I do really sincerely appreciate your time. I think the way we should wrap this up is the fact that you brought up a Michael Jordan quote: "The day I stop improving is the day I walk away from the game."
Hmm.
The way we wrap up every episode on the Athletes Podcast is we ask our guest what their biggest piece of advice would be for the next generation of athletes. Rhonda Rajsich, having all of your experiences, journeys, 9 lives as you've referred to them as in other podcasts, I'd love for you to share what you have for the Athletes Podcast listeners.
Again, if we're talking about young athletes, you got to make sure that you're having fun. I hate to say it, but I think sometimes parents and coaches have the ability to somehow suck the joy out of the sport when they place certain expectations or certain, um, you know, outcome, um, ultimatums on their kids. And I think that's what the adults need to remember is, this is all these sports are a game. They were born out of someone or a group of people wanting to have fun doing something active. And I think that can get lost in the chase of achievement. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm one of the most competitive people I know on the planet, when it comes to wanting to win and what it takes to get there. But again, you can't just not enjoy. And I understand. I mean, there's going to be times that suck. There's going to be those 5 a.m. workouts that that suck. There's going to be those days of soreness that suck. But I'm not saying that it doesn't come with, all the ingredients of what it takes to actually be great. But it is a game. It is meant to be fun, and especially for the kids. Yes, we want them to be active. Yes, we want them to be social and make friends and teammates and all that. But in doing so, they should be having fun too. If they're not enjoying that sport, introduce them to whatever, as many sports as you can. Let them find the one or the multiple ones that they really fall in love with, that they.
Yeah, I could not agree with you more. I think the other thing we need to remind those adults is that everyone needs to get paid, and you winning a championship and making 50 times less than the male counterpart is something we need to address. Thank you again. We also should give a shout out to Tom Sis, is that how I see his last name?
Chez.
Chez?
Chez. Yeah.
Chez. Who actually introduced us a year ago, and I dropped the ball, whatever happened. But yeah, shout out to Tom Chez. Sly Drinks, is that his brand?
Yeah. Sly.
Drink
Drink on the
drink
sly.
on the sly. Have you had
Yeah.
them? I need to get them.
I have. I was a kind of a taste tester when they were putting the flavors together.
No way. What are they
Yeah.
like? Time to chill, hey?
Yep. There's a few different kinds, and they do different flavors, and they serve different purposes too. So yeah, I highly recommend. Highly recommend. They're not the flavors are very subtle. They're not overwhelming. You're not gonna get like amped up, jittery. You're not gonna knock out. Like it's just they've done it right. They knew what their target was and they did it right. With what they've done with their new products. I'm excited for them.
Tom Chez crushing it. I love it. I do also have to ask before I let you go, just because you're an athlete, you're familiar. Did you hear about Live Golf PGA joining forces? Like, have you any comment on that? Did you like see that at all this morning?
I did not see that this morning. I remember the big old controversy a couple of months ago of, the players that were jumping ship and who was getting involved and who was, speaking out or speaking up. And I remember all that, but I didn't hear what happened today.
It's they're like apparently they're dropping all like disputes in between both, and like they're coming together, and I have no idea. There's just not enough information out, but I think some players are pissed off, and I think it's gonna shake up the game of golf considerably. So who the heck knows what's gonna happen? I certainly
Wow.
don't, but yeah, just figured I'd ask. Anyway,
Yeah, that is fascinating. That is
yeah,
fascinating.
it is
I did not
wild.
see
I
that
hope it
coming. I thought that would be like the last thing that they would do. It seemed like they wanted to kind of go head
right.
to head and have a pissing contest instead.
Yeah, and now I think there's like Tiger Woods and Rory McIlroy losing millions, if not billions of dollars because of this. And like, yeah, I
Jeez.
don't know. It's going to be wild. Rhonda,
I
I
agree.
can't thank you enough. Again, I really appreciate your time. I can't wait to chat in person when we can go through a session on the court, little workout training, whatever the case may be. I really
I'm
appreciate your
down.
time. That's
I'm
awesome.
down. Sounds great, David. Thank you so much. I
Thanks.
really appreciate it.
Thanks so much for coming on. Thank you, folks, so much for tuning in to the 179th episode of the Athletes Podcast. Crazy to think we've done 179 of these, and we're going to have 179 more in the next 3.5 years. Big shout out goes to Rhonda for coming on the show, Tom Chez for introducing us and making this happen. Again, thank you to our sponsor, Rooted. Use the code AP20 at checkout. Men's, women's, prenatal options. It's the best in the business. Let me know what you think. I appreciate you tuning into this episode of the Athletes Podcast. Check it out next week when we feature Alex Caron on the Athletes Podcast. We'll see you there. Bye.